Okay, thank you for tuning into Stampscapes 101. This is a video on how to utilize some different grass textures in a scene. I reference this scene right here, which is a half-page scene, using a lot of different grass in here to unify the scene from all of these different elements like a pond, mountains, and cabin, as far as the main imagery in here, and how to utilize things like the Sedge Filler stamp. And in this case I used the grass texture here and some reeds in the foreground, but just how to build up your tones. Well, first how to stamp these out where things are a little bit, more seamless as far as the integration of different components, and how to add in your color, how to choose your colors, light tones, darker greens, applying them in a step-by-step fashion, and then finishing off the area, or that given space, with some additional texture. Okay? There's a lot of different color schemes you can do this in, but just to keep things simple, in terms of most people's notion of grass, they're thinking green, so we just stuck to that green scheme. But how you use that texture and how to apply the different tones in it will be the same, just changing things around a little bit. Here's another cabin with some trees in here, but essentially this background in here is using the same texture stamp, the Sedge Filler, that I did on most of this one right here. Okay, a little bit of a different tone in here. This one's, looks a little bit more mellow with a little bit more browns in here. This one hits a little bit more greens. Things are a little bit more vibrant. And in this scene right here, I didn't have, I don't know, I might have used one green in here, if that, but for the most part, it's a different type of color scheme in here. But all of these areas of shadow and light are basically the same in terms of your approach, okay? So, anyways, another stamp along video, and if you choose to do this, I hope you have a good time and learn everything that you want to know about kind of filler imagery, alright? This type of technique here is not just for grass, but it is working around these different components. But if you've watched the one on water, you'll find that the technique is basically the same. Instead of using the sedge filler and grass textures, I was just using the water texture stamp. So it makes it all nice and easy if you kind of apply it in this step-by-step fashion. So anyways, thanks for tuning in. Okay, grasses and grass textures. We have let me see, what is this? 7 different elements here. There are others in the Stampscapes line, but for the most part you can achieve, I don't know, just about anything you want in terms of filler stamps and in terms of depth within a grassy area. With these stamps right here, there's other things that I do, but for the most part the basics are kind of distant grass. It could be near grass too. Different types of grass textures. This one's more rounded, this one's more of just a kind of a generic texture. And kind of a mid-range grass. I call this one the tall grass small. Tall grass, not large, just tall grass. Grass texture and sedge filler. The sedge filler one, though, for me is kind of my main go-to stamp in terms of a grassy field. I use it in foregrounds and backgrounds. It's kind of the foundation to build around different objects and to bring kind of separate main objects together. This cabin and this pond right here. Kind of the interior is filled just with this grass or sedge filler. Same thing, here's another postcard. It just happens to be using that cabin, but this one has the the crooked path instead of something like a pond. And again, it's the Sedge Filler that's been used as kind of the filler stamp and the foundation on which a lot of these other elements are kind of planted into. Alright? So I'll show you how to use these stamps with one another. It's kind of, if you watched the water pattern stamp, it's used in really the same fashion as that one. Now, there's all kinds of different color schemes you can do. If I did a nighttime scene that's looking at a bunch of grass, you're not really going to see green. I would probably do it in blue or something like that, something where the moonlight has kind of sapped out the color of the landscape. If it's a winter at nighttime or something like that, something cold. This one right here is more of a kind of a fall type of color scheme. Maybe it's, it's no longer where kind of there's nice greens and wildflowers within that area. But just to simplify things, I'm going to do green grass, okay? Now this texture here is fairly light and airy, so when I stamp this out, we're going to want to do it in one of your darker greens. Now, depending on what brand of pads you have, or, well, maybe it doesn't matter really what brand of pads you have. Here's some mementos right here. The distress inks are a little bit too light for the main image, but we can use those as some of the tones that we fill in to our scene. Here's some Marvy greens, but just like in the water stamp along video, we're picking out kind of a range of values within a given color scheme, okay? So ideally you want some sort of lighter green, yellow-greenish maybe, mid-tone greens, and a darker green, alright? I'm not sure what value that memento is. It might be a little bit lighter than that. Cover. Here's a really nice green from Marvy. It's called the Pine Green, and let me see if I have it. Yeah. When I look at my pads across the desk, sometimes I'm not quite sure if this one's black, but this one's called Bottle Green, and it's a really dark green. I really like it from Marvy. It's the number 25. But basically, just go for your dark tones, alright? Now there are other things that you can do if you're stamping along. Let's say you don't have any dark green at all. Go ahead and use your dark blue, okay? Blue is a component of green, so if we add yellows over the tops of some blues, you'll be able to achieve a darker green just by the very nature of these two colors overlapping and thus reading as green, okay? So you can even use, those three blues that if you've done those other stamp along videos, okay? But if you have a dark green, go ahead and use that one. Alright, now let me do a couple of different compositions here. What you'll do is you'll grab your Sedge Filler. If you happen to have one of the larger grasses, you can use that as well. Let me do two different types here. One kind of field of grass that includes something kind of larger clusters of it closer to the viewer's eye, so maybe you're looking at a field that's, I don't know, depth of field that's 3 feet to, I don't know, whatever, 50 yards, let's say, alright? So, let's see. I'm going to go with the Bottle Green, I think. From Marvy, if you have like a Christmassy green, that one's not really Christmassy, but like this one's a number 4. That one's a real neutral dark green, like a Christmas green or something like that. Go ahead and use that one. I'm going to go a little bit darker just for this video so that hopefully you can see it a little bit better. Alright? If you're using kind of some larger grass textures in addition to the Sedge Filler, I would typically recommend stamping the larger one first, like so, overlapping roughly a 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch into the previous impression, okay? So that's in the foreground here, and with the Sedge Filler, you're going ahead and using the same ink, okay? And I'll just build this up, about like so. And it just depends on how much grass you want. I'm not going to work around like a cabin or something like this in this video. I just want to work on the grass texture techniques, okay? You can even change the angle a little bit, where it's sloped, slightly. So it's something like that. It doesn't look great now, but we don't have any color in there right now either. Okay, so that's kind of larger clusters in addition to the smaller ones. Let's go with the grass texture stamp. Ink it up. Now, if you're doing these textures and building them up like this, I typically would recommend every time you make an impression, with the larger ones at least, to re-ink it for every impression. Alright, there's the larger one, that's the grass texture. And we'll build up some smaller or more distant grass, you can see. Now on this one, the Sedge Filler, you don't have to re-ink it every time if you don't want to. Alright, so that looks like that. And here's a close-up of this one. Okay. And that, believe it or not, is what it will end up looking like, in terms of the grassy areas here. You can see all those different yellows and greens that we'll bring into the scene. Alright, now let's just do a Sedge Filler only. Okay. I'm getting about 4 impressions with that Sedge Filler stamp. 2, 3, 4, roughly about. Now when I'm stamping this one out too, usually I have my finger in the middle here, and I'm just giving it a light, impression. Here's what you don't want to do with kind of these filler stamps, where you want things to be nice and seamless. You want to overlap for one, but when you do these, don't ink it up and rock your stamp back and forth with so much pressure that you get something like that, okay? You want to just go for light, even pressure, okay? So that's the difference between those two. We don't want that. The sides are too there's too much pressure on the sides, so you're getting, kind of a real boxy look, And let's say you're working with a brand new stamp pad or something like that. Not very seamless, the edges of the when you ink up these stamps, there's ink that's getting onto the perimeter right around here, and you don't want that to impress on the scene, okay? So just light, even pressure. Most of the pressure on these ones are from my, finger on the top of it, okay? Alright, a little bit more seamless up top there, less seamless down below. If you did happen to get one of these, though, I wouldn't worry about it too much, because once we've run in all of our tones into the scene, these kind of, I don't know, heavier-handed, rocked impressions will blend in with the surrounding areas a little bit more than they are now. But if you can avoid it, get something like this instead. That doesn't mean to stamp it gingerly, and, without any pressure at all, but just light, even pressure and you should be fine. Okay, so this is what we have right now. Alright, I don't know, I can add the tones to any one of these. Why don't I do it with this one right here, just so we get a little bit of variation. This is the one that's using the grass texture and the Sedge Filler. Okay. Alright. What colors to start off with? What you'll want is some sort of sponge applicator. I will use my stylus tool, which I thought I just cleaned off. It looks like there's still a little bit of yellow-green in there or something. But that will be fine. Alright, now, whatever colors you're going with, whatever line of pads you're going with, you're basically just going, you can mix and match too. You're going to start off with some lighter tones and work incrementally, or I don't know what the word is, step by step into your darker tones, right? Lightest colors first. Maybe we can even use this distress peeled paint or mustard seed. I don't have too many distress inks, but they're all very good, and I don't know, I don't think I've used much of this one, so I haven't used it for a while too. I'm kind of unfamiliar with the tone and value. It looks pretty good though. Looks like a neutral yellow to me. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my card. This is kind of top and bottom, but I'm going to turn my card and start streaking in some of this color from the outside and working my way in. This pad is really, really juicy, so I'm getting a lot of coverage here. Okay, now here's the thing. I think that it's more interesting of an area to have changes in value within a given space. If this area in here was all that tone, or that value of green in here, it would look much more flat, okay? So I think it's best to have kind of an oscillation of shadows and lighter areas within a given space. Where that would apply to this down here is when I'm bringing in some color like this, it's just to retain some areas of light. In other words, just don't tone everything out, okay? Leave some areas a little bit lighter. Where you do that, there's no right or wrong, okay? Now, I don't know, I think did I ink that up once or twice? I think I just did one inking with that mustard seed yellow. And that's pretty much as I'll need to do. Now, when this gets drier, this yellow right here, now, when I say leave some areas light, don't leave big, huge areas, the white of the paper. Use this lightest color fairly extensively, but you don't have to use it in the highest amount of saturation, okay, like out here, in here, okay? Maybe you use kind of more of a drier brush approach to it, where it's very dry on here, and I'm getting a lighter value of it, just for the very nature that it's dry on here, so, it's more like this color of yellow than that one, okay? Alright. Now, when you've achieved kind of a pretty decent coverage, but just leaving some areas a little bit lighter, like I don't think it's going to get any darker out here using more of that yellow, okay? I can dab on another 100 layers and it's never going to get darker than that, because that's the full value of that given color, okay? Well, that's when you need to move on to your next tone. Okay, so you need to pause the video to catch up. Pause right now. But the next color, I'll try some of this peeled paint. It looks like a yellow-green to me from the cover, so let's try it out. Dab it. It's kind of, it's less yellowy than I thought. It's more of like an olive green to me, or at least to my eye. Okay, now apply this in roughly the same area that you did your previous tone, okay? And use a little bit less of it, or just use more of the drier version of it, okay? So it's starting to come together. It's kind of fleshing the scene in, you might say. It's unifying a lot of different impressions with the use of a universal tone being applied. Okay. Bring some of it in here, but at this point in time this is very dry, and I'm doing a very light touch. I think if I did one swipe, I don't think we'd be able to see anything at all at this point in time, okay? I have to add a few swipes for it to even show up, okay? And that's what you want. You want to have a kind of a control over what you're applying. The drier it is on here, the more strokes it takes to see anything. It's a slower process, but there's a lot more control over it that way. Alright, Memento Pear Tart. I don't think that's going to be darker than what I have on here, so let's try this Bamboo Leaves, okay? Let's test it out. And again, you don't switch your tip here, just keep using the same one. Same thing, apply it on the outside edge, okay? So that's a little bit darker down here. And just keep applying it into the scene. One of the things I'm kind of doing too is I'm kind of tilting my applicator a little bit. So that I don't get so much coverage in the center area. It's kind of tilted at an angle, okay? Kind of going for the streakier, thinner application of that ink. Okay, it's just a little bit darker, so like I said at the beginning, it's kind of incrementally darker. If you have to jump from a very light color to a, you know, a very dark one, like this, okay, this to this, believe it or not, that is a bottle green here. You can do that, but just be a lot more careful about your application, okay, because that's a big jump in value. If you have those midtones, go ahead and use them. And like I said, green with blue, so if you don't have a midtone green, you can always use a midtone blue in here. And blue overlapping the yellow should form some sort of midtone green. Okay, that's good for the Bamboo Leaves. Let's go to the Cottage Ivy. Okay, I'm kind of just dabbing it in. I am getting into some of the darker tones. And I do want to retain a lot of the lighter areas, so maybe I'm just coming in from here to about right here, okay, with the darker tone. Not going throughout the whole thing. If I do come into the center a little bit more with it, it'll be with the drier application of this given color. Okay. And you can pause the video if I ever start getting ahead. Just place some ketchup. With the darker tones, we're not really doing as much as we did with the lighter tones. Unless you really like what's coming out and you just want to use more and more and more, by all means, let your eye be the judge of things. If you get to, like, this, you know, your darker tones, and if it doesn't, the scene just doesn't have the depth and vibrancy that you're hoping for at any given time, just switch tips or go back to, you know, clean off your tip and go back to the lighter tone and add it right over the top of this again. And it might brighten up the scene, you know, and give it more value. You can't go back in with a lighter color, though, and add lighter colors in the middle here and have it get lighter. Okay, it's just going to get getting darker and darker and darker, because these are transparent colors that we're working with. They're not translucent or opaque. Okay, I happen to like a lot of darker tones in my corners, so I'll hit a lot of this green on the bottom left and right corner. But you can see where this is kind of going right here. It's kind of getting, it's kind of moving in this direction. Okay. This one has more of an earthy look, and we're going to get to that. Okay. A lot of times when I'm just using, I haven't used these colors right here, but they're similar, but anytime you just work through only greens in a field of grass, I feel that it looks a little bit too bright. There's something that's missing about it. And what I've found that works really well for me is to go in with a kind of brown tones of some sort. All right. This one's a distressed tea dye. It's kind of a, it's not the lightest of the browns within that range of inks, but it's also not very dark either. Okay, let me just add some of it down here, and I'll show you the difference between one side of the page and the other. Alright, see this right here? See how bright and just kind of, I don't know, to me it's a little boring, but you can see this orangish tinge right in here, and it's kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, maybe a muddier green, but I just think that looks better like that. Alright, now let's use that over the entire area, okay? It looks more full to me, in terms of a, you know, kind of a color statement than just grass, you know. Grass is green, let's just only use green, okay? If you look at an area of grass, there's usually some changes in temperature. You can see other colors within that space. When you only use green for green, blue for blue sky, etc., they call that local color in kind of art classes or in painting classes. And it just means that, you know, it's kind of using one's kind of association with those objects as to what color to do it. But even if you look at a white wall, sometimes there's a lot of different colors in it, so kind of observe, be more observant. You know, it's more maybe like an observant field of grass than kind of one's, you know, notion of it. All right, now that's a little bit of that tea dye in there. Let's see, I had this Memento Cocoa. This one's getting really dark right here. If you have kind of a, the color that I used to like to use a lot, and I still do, it's more of this neutral mid-tone brown from Marby. If you happen to have a brown, I would recommend, you know, if you're doing scenic stamping, colors like this, a range of brown tones. Now, a lot of people have the distress inks, so let's say this pale orange. You can theoretically leave that one out, but if you have another tone of brown, there's mid-tone distress inks too, okay? You can use those ones. But having some form of brown tone, in this case it's like Memento's Rich Cocoa, and this one it's number 18, Dark Brown from Marby. But this mid-range one was really good too. It's kind of bright and very warm. Okay, let me add that in like so. You can kind of see it right there. See the difference between that green over there and that one? That's what I'm kind of going after. It kind of mellows out an area from the high intensity of it, or maybe I don't know, the electric green. Okay, and you can see it right here a little bit. You can see where I've added some of the brown tones within that space. That's what it looks like at arm's distance, but kind of that's what kind of we're going after a little bit here. All right. Okay. Now, as far as control goes, just like with the other colors, if you keep using that, don't re-ink it so often unless you're using a kind of a drier pad. Utilize your dry version of it a lot across the page. Like, I think that looks really good right in here, that kind of little streak in there, but it's with a dry, very dry brown at this point in time. And I can use something more in here, I think. So it's just kind of warming it up a little bit. This, you know, your brown tones are inherently warm in temperature. All right. And if you'll notice, we're working through these green tones right here, but that is going to be the exact same technique that if you end up watching the stamp along with how to do water, it's basically, now then, you know, this grass one, I left some areas up here, but you can see the same thing, the same pattern type of thing with streaks and light and oscillation of light and dark. It's happening in here. We have dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So light, 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 and you have light, light, light. Not that you're always having to go for 3, or, you know, it has to be kind of centered or something like that, but it's the same process, all right? Same concept. You have this oscillation there leading to a kind of a more rich visual space. Okay, now a lot of times when I add, this one doesn't look too bad right here, but I feel that in a lot of grassy areas, sometimes when I start adding in a lot of different tones over the top of my grass textures, sometimes it can start to look a little bit muddy, all right? Now this one you can't see it too much because I have so many other things going on in here. But sometimes it can get kind of muddy in here. There's just so much color that's been used overlapping the Sedge Filler stamps and whatnot. So you can see these little extra little elements in here. So sometimes what I do is I take and I bring in, I introduce a crisp element back into an area that's a little bit like muddled, you know, from just the sheer amount of overlapping that's occurred. So what I like to do in this grassy areas, or these grassy areas that, you know, we get to within a scene, is I'll bring in something like this one. This one's called Bush. I think this one's Bush, and this one's Bush Large, okay? You can also use reeds or something like this in the same I'll do both in here. Let's see, I'm trying to think, what color should I do? These ones have to be dark, so I think I'm going to use my black pad for this. Take a rip paper towel and I'm just going to add some of these elements in here. Kind of popping out from the grass. Okay. So it's crisp in, oh, maybe soft. So we have a little bit of contrast in there. Now, what I like to do, and you can see it in this scene right here too, these little things kind of popping out from the grassy surface. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my reed stamp right here and kind of finish off this space. And this is the reeds large. Okay, so I did about 3 impressions each time. Now when you stamp this one out, stamp it, re-ink it, and what I'm doing is I'm changing the angle a little bit, and just like the Sedge Filler, just get light, even pressure. With stamps like the reeds, where you have these little, you know, I wouldn't say delicate, but kind of thinner tops, at this point in time, you don't want to finish the scene off and put an extra amount of pressure. So, see, that's if I rock the stamp right there, it would look like that. So, when you use it, just light even pressure. I'm using most of the pressure on my kind of finger right here in the middle. Okay. And you get that. I'm kind of change the angle. Like so. And what I like to do is I like to leave a little bit of an opening right here, kind of for the viewer to go in as if you're, you know, there's a visual opening within that space. And that's what I do. You can, I mean, not that you can't put something here, you know, it'll, you know, you can kind of create, you know, this little scene in the background where it's closed off as well. But I would change the height of it here. See this right here? In other words, I want to take this and stamp it like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know? Like a picket fence running across that. I like to go for a little bit more variation, okay? But anyways, that's how you achieve that type of look. And that's, you know, how this one has been achieved. You can see where I've kind of masked off here, and I have extra reeds kind of jutting out from that grass as well. And you can do that. You can go like, you know, mask this off and have some, you know, additional grass coming out from there. Or you can use the smaller version of this one, kind of in the background. But that's a fun way to finish off a scene with those reeds, like so. We have an element of, you know, really sharp and crisp and near in this one grassy area. And then we have far, all right? You can put something back there. This area right here can also be just used as filler around other objects that you're doing, you know, which is mainly what, you know, most of the times I don't just stamp a grassy field, but that's the basics there as far as how you can approach your different grassy spaces, all right? Now here's the thing, if you're stamping other things into it, like a tree or something like that, a lot of times, here's my trick right here. What I do is I ink up my trees or people or whatever, and I take and I wipe off some of the bottom of it, okay? So it's not like if you're stamping it, if you're within a grassy area, chances are you'd be sinking into it so you wouldn't see the base, you know, the hard flat edges of the, you know, like this trunk right here. Or here's some people right here, these hikers. You can see where I've kind of wiped off the bottom of their feet, okay, so that they're in the grass. Same thing with some trees. You can do that. You can mask off a bit and have the tree coming out of that taller grass. Maybe it's springtime. Oh, here it is right here. See these trunks right here? I didn't even stamp those ones out over here. I just used the top of it. You know, you don't have to go all the way up here like I did, but you can. There they are again on the other side. They're just using the tops of them. There it is again right here. I'm just using an even smaller portion of it. So, you don't want, a grass that's 10 feet deep, and you're only going to stamp like, the rooftop of the cabin or something like that, but kind of you get the point there. And within grass areas, there's always really fun things you can do. You can kind of finish off some areas in them. You can, the little dewdrops, or wildflowers if you have like a pink pen or a purple pen or something like that, or orange or white. Things like this can really add in some great texture into a scene. I don't know if you can even see it. Let's see if this camera will do a close-up in here. But anyway, that's the basics on grass. And as far as how I approach it, you can do, if you're out in California, most of the times the hills are brown, so you can do just your brown tones. Just working through the lighter tones first, and then work into your darker tones. Maybe it's not quite the fall, maybe it's spring transitioning into fall, so maybe you can work in, tones like this, or something like that, where there's a little bit of green, or you can do all browns and streak in some areas of tone. And in something like this, I wouldn't be surprised, I can't remember now, but you can see like in the water where I've added a little bit of pink, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of pink on the grass here. Just to kind of make things a little bit more interesting as far as a color scheme goes, and it makes it a little bit more sophisticated than just having green grass, okay? You can bring in, if there's a blue sky up here, bring a little bit of blue into this area right here, so it kind of creates that connection between the land and the lighting and colors that are around it, okay? So kind of creates that connection. All right, so anyways, I hope you enjoyed doing some grass here. Play around with it, change your color schemes, add in some turquoise colors or whatever, blend in, make some blue tone grass, then use some greens and yellows over the top of it, and it'll convert it, a blue color scheme into greens, because of course the other side of blue added to yellow is green. So you can play around with that too and try to extend the use of your existing dye-based pads for secondary colors. Alright, so thanks as always for watching, and thanks for tuning into the Stampscapes channel.